Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today's episode is a special one recorded on Bonfire Night, the perfect backdrop for a conversation about fire safety. I'm joined by two outstanding guests, John Field, Chair of the IOSH Fire Risk Management Group, and Bernie Higgins, former Principal Officer at the London Fire Brigade and Board Member of the Fire Industry Association. Together we explore how organisations can move beyond compliance to create genuine cultures of fire safety, from lessons learned on the front line to leadership and mindset shifts that make a lasting difference. We talk about everything from tragic incidents that shaped their careers to the rise of lithium-ion battery risks and how businesses can build resilience before disaster strikes. Whether you're in safety, risk or leadership, this conversation will challenge how you think about fire risk and inspire you to light a different kind of spark, one of leadership, curiosity and continuous improvement. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Fantastic. So thank you everybody for joining this safety roundtable session today on the 5th of November. Remember the 5th of November and all of that jazz. As I just said when I was, before we got properly started, I couldn't resist doing a fire safety episode on the 5th of November when I saw the diaries aligning. And really delighted to have a couple of experts in the field joining us today to talk about this topic. They're going to introduce themselves properly in a moment, but I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. John is joining us live today. Bernie wasn't available today. So what we did was we pre-recorded a chat with John and Bernie, which I'm going to play for you in a second. And then John's hanging around. So at the end, after the sort of pre-recorded bit, there'll be time to ask questions to John or raise any comments, thoughts, etc. So do you want to just say hello, John?
Yeah, certainly. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
So John's here, but we wanted to get Bernie on as well, so therefore we did the pre-recording job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the video that we ran yesterday, and then do fire away with questions, comments, etc. in the chat. We're going to be here watching and ready to jump in on anything. So let me get this going, and then I hope that you enjoy this, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for joining me today, guys, on on Bonfire Night, although we're recording a day before.
The irony.
It's good to have you on, and perhaps we could start by just giving a very quick intro to your respective selves, and then we can get into some of the questions. Do you want to start, Bernie?
Thanks, Christian, and thanks for inviting me to do this. It's a real privilege, so I'm really grateful. So I'm Bernie Higgins, used to be in the fire service. In fact, spent all my working life in the fire sector. Joined London Fire Brigade at the age of 16, worked my way up, but retired at the age of 50, and now run my own fire safety consultancy business. I've done some other things in between, but generally I'm in the fire and fire safety world, fire sector world. So although I run my own business, I'm also a member of IOSH, which is how I know John, from the community that we're both in, the fire community within IOSH, and yeah, really enjoying. I still enjoy the job. I still love the challenges which we're going to talk about today, and most importantly, I'm very passionate about keeping people safe, Christian.
Fantastic. Well, we share that passion. John.
Hi, Christian. Yes, thank you for the invite. Much appreciated. Bit about me. Did 20 years emergency services, predominantly Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. Got into fire safety, then jumped ship, worked for Imperial College London, worked for an SME supplier, Keystone Fire Safety, worked for the John Lewis Partnership, now currently work for a company called Donata Catering as their fire safety manager. I also own my own business, Zach Thomas Safety Limited. And yeah, I love fire safety because it's all about problem solving. You used to get to an incident, Bernie would know this, people hanging out the window, flames coming out. Right, how do I solve this problem? What resources do I have? And what do I need? And what don't I need to solve the problem? And it is fantastic that an offshoot, in essence, is that I keep people safe as well, just like Bernie said.
Yeah. And that's a good sort of segue into the first question I was keen to ask you guys, which is, was there a particular incident either that you were involved in or just that you're aware of that kind of shaped the way you view fire risk and fire prevention? Any thoughts on that, Bernie?
Yeah, the one that really springs to mind is unfortunately, and it really is unfortunate about the safety world in general, but especially fire safety, is you normally need to have a tragedy to get things moving. People don't often see necessarily a coming threat until it's materialized, and they think, oh wow, that was awful, I don't want that to happen to me. So the incident that really colored it, and it was quite a long way into my service, excuse me, was a fire that occurred in southwest London. I won't say where because it's not it's not necessarily relevant or fair to the people that were involved. It's a fire in some flats. This block of flats, very community focused. They'd all got together one summer's night and had a little barbecue out on the lawns in front of their flats. One of the families had left their children asleep in bed and had fire in the kitchen. No fire stopping between the kitchen and the bedrooms above. The fire in the kitchen spread straight up through the ducting and pipework and the gaps. And sadly, both children died in the fire. And you just thought, wow, for the sake of someone doing their job and getting that fire stopping put right, those two children would still be alive today. And it was quite a harrowing incident because, as you can appreciate, a lot of people there's a huge amount of emotion, and rightly so. Firefighters did a fantastic job, but the children, sadly, before we'd even been called, the children were probably already perished. And that for me was a tragedy that I just thought wholly preventable just by having good fire safety in that building would have stopped it. So that's what really shaped me to thinking, how can we stop this ever happening to someone else again?
No, that doesn't sound like a nice thing to have experienced.
No, sadly not. But as I say, the big thing for me, because you can detach yourself when you're I'm sure John would feel this. I mean this in the nicest way. There's emotion and you feel for those people, and you really do. But you have to detach yourself from that as a firefighter and just say, I've got to solve the problems. I've got to block that out and deal with what's in front of me. And firefighters in general and officers are very good at doing that. But then afterwards you reflect and think, let's stop that happening again. We don't want that happening to anyone again, because it does have an impact somewhere, doesn't it, John?
Yes, definitely, buddy. I mean, for me, there were lots of incidents that are reflective of the home, but also within a business. So there will be fires, perhaps electrical fires in the kitchen. So that brings over the importance of electrical safety. The fact that people, throughout remove their kitchen doors, which might have held something back, then means that the fire can progress throughout the house. So that again gives the importance of fire doors. Dealt with many incidents in that respect. The housekeeping, again, not being judgmental, but the housekeeping of the property didn't lend itself nicely to protecting that means of escape, which makes it difficult to get out of the property if there's a fire. Not having a fire plan as well. So considering if there's a fire in this house, how are we going to get out? And when I was in the fire service, we used to go do year 2 visits and teach the young children the importance of practicing. Right, in the event of a fire, you're going to get out and you need to practice it. And then bit of fun. Why don't you might be practicing in the daylight and have someone that can see, but put a blindfold on and see if you can find your way out, etc. And just exactly as you said, Bernie, I was fine. There was no judgment. You just switched on to operation mode. You went in, you did the job, you got out. The issue then became really afterwards when the person was humanised. When you started hearing a bit of background about the person, that's when it started having an impact and an effect.
Yeah, and there are even, as I understand it, I've not done it obviously, but I understand that during that time where you attend something and a fire is taking place, you have to take these split-second decisions, but you are having to calculate. Sometimes I can't save that person, but I might be able to save that person, and see is that fair? That's difficult decisions to make.
I'll be honest, Christian, and this is where John and I's experience possibly differ. It's not that often that happens.
Okay.
So the majority of times you turn up. Sometimes I can think of 3 occasions, and we haven't got time now, but 3 occasions in my fire service career when I had to make decisions like that. But that's 3 in over 30 years.
Yeah.
So they don't come often. They don't come around that often. Most of the fires, fortunately, if people have done even the very basics and just closed doors behind them and the building is fairly well constructed, they stay in the compartment of origin. They stay in the room where they started.
Yeah.
But it's only when they progress. And of course, and there's been a lot written about this, Christian, and I think it does bleed over into other areas of safety. There's a thing called recognition prime decision making, where you start to look at every fire, or you can if you're not switched on, as if, right, this is that size of fire, we're going to do this, without actually getting the full information about that tactic might not work this time, because every building is different, the circumstances are different, what's burning in the building is different, and therefore you always have to judge on actually what you see in front of you. It's a bit like a sports team. Play what's in front of you. Don't try and predict too much. You can from some experience and predict there's a place for that, but what you don't want is recognition prime decision making, where you have a default mode of saying just do that every time we turn out the door. And that's not too different from safety, because it's very easy to look around and think, oh, this is the same as the one I did last week, and I need to do this, and almost you're pre-priming your advice and guidance. Whereas actually it needs to be relevant to that building, that circumstance, those occupants, rather than just some pre-programmed thought about, well, I saw this last week and therefore that must be the same this week.
Yeah.
I'd pick up on a couple of those aspects, in the fact that really you, as a firefighter, you're trained, you're going to go into a building to save savable life in a highly calculated way. If there's that perception that life, in essence, I mean, this is very morbid, this discussion, but is deceased, then you're not going to muck around trying to get that person out, because so it might be a crime scene. Also, you can spend your time then actually carrying on, because you've got a limited amount of air, limited amount of time in that building, that property. The fire could be getting worse, so you're going in to then get the people that are savable out the building. I was fortunate enough to volunteer. Bedfordshire had a marauding terrorist attack team, and I was one of those volunteers. And part of the training was specifically that you would look to save the lives that were savable. You would have a paramedic who was a member of the HART team, the hazard area response team, and they would dictate, right, okay, we're not going to deal with that person, but we can deal with this person, this person, this person. And you basically have to do the most for the most, in essence. And then exactly what Bernie says, unfortunately, the fire service has come a cropper in the past, because part of the training used to be you'd go in the firehouse, don't put the fire out because we need it for the next crew. So you'd walk straight past it, dealing with what you're dealing, and then a knock-on effect to that was, there was a real incident where everyone walked past the fire because their training was, don't put it out. Now you can use it to light the area and to sort of be able to see what's going on, but generally the fire is the thing that you do want to put out because it makes the atmosphere unsurvivable for a lot of people. So that should be a bit of a focus. But again, you've got to consider, if I put water on that, will it then create steam, and will people come to harm as a result? So you've got to do a lot of figuring out and calculations. If I start spraying water everywhere, that might disrupt the thermal layers, and then I won't be able to see anything. And so yeah, there's lots and lots of considerations when you're going into an incident.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And we'll try and shift away from that side of things because, as you say, it's not the nicest thing to talk about, but it's valuable thing to cover. Obviously, we've talked about a few things or aspects already of causation of incidents, but also causation of incidents getting worse than they maybe could be otherwise. What would you say is the key thing that maybe worries you most about how organisations approach fire safety currently in the UK? Is there one sort of key theme that you think is the big one?
If I can start, John, for me, the biggest single thing I see is when someone, and it does, my heart sinks when I hear this. Oh, so and so is responsible for fire safety. One person. And I'll always say, if it's a one-person organisation, if it's a small shop or it's a small business, of course there's only going to be one or two people. My attitude is always, if you want a safe building, if you want safe property, regardless of whether it's residential, commercial or whatever, it's a team approach. I went out the other day and did a fire safety risk assessment, and I took my two sons with me because one of them's in the fire service as an inspecting officer, and the other one's learning to become a fire safety professional. Do you know what? Having three pairs of eyes saying, have you seen this? Have you seen that? I promise you, we picked up 3 times as much stuff as we would have done with just me on my own. Now, a fire risk assessment is only a snapshot in time anyway. But what it reinforced for me is, you can't have just one person and say they do fire safety. I don't do fire safety. I don't really do that. What you want is a culture of safety, and it doesn't matter really what aspects of health and safety. In my head, no matter what aspects you're dealing with, you need to build a culture, a team culture. And I've seen some of your previous podcasts, Christian, where you've talked about building that team culture. You can't leave it to one person. And there's a saying, I've picked it up. I enjoy my sport, and there's a saying that I think the All Blacks rugby team, New Zealand rugby team, use about, if you walk past it, you accept it, and therefore your standards should be such that you're constantly looking and you're thinking that doesn't look right. Now, even if you don't know, even if your experience of fire safety or health and safety is such that you don't know, if there's something in your head that says that doesn't look right, report it, please. Because the amount of times you go into places and you point something out and say, look, that's been like that for a long time, isn't it? Yeah, well, the fire safety guy has been, hasn't been around to do it. Well, don't blame that fire safety guy, man or woman. You should all be looking at, that doesn't look right. And it's that culture that I'd love to, if we could do that, Christian, if we could, I would say the best buildings, you can have a building full of state-of-the-art fire, passive and active fire safety protection. If it's poorly managed, it's not that safe. And conversely, a building that hasn't got state-of-the-art protection, active and passive protection, that's well managed, can actually be quite safe. In fact, very safe, because there's a good management in place. People pick things up early, the problems get addressed, and everyone in that building goes about their business safely. And that's what I think we need to create in this country, is that culture of safety, rather than just, it's always been like that and it's not my responsibility, it's so-and-so's responsibility who's not here today.
Yeah. Before you answer that question, John, in your travels, Bernie, because you mentioned, in this country, but I know that was the response to my question, but do you feel as if there are some countries either just through you've experienced it or knowledge or whatever, that actually are a bit better than us at that culture?
I've not experienced enough
Okay.
to really have a real opinion on it. What I would say is that some of the stuff I've seen from colleagues
Yeah.
who are working currently in the Middle East, they are really working hard to have that safety culture, and it is a real culture shift in terms of making people safe. So,
Mm.
from what I'm hearing about some of the big developments in the Middle East of the world, I'm hearing they're doing a lot of really good, positive stuff around creating a good safety culture in the
Yeah.
early stages and in the design stage of it all. And
Mhm.
I think we can learn a lot from that and bring that back over here.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. John, what would be your sort of biggest concern of the state of play at the moment?
So I would build on Bernie's comments and fully endorse those comments. And my emphasis will be that the focus and the drive has to come from the top down. Really, it needs the board, a specific member of the board, perhaps it needs to be on the agenda, fire safety, health and safety. It has to be top down driven for everyone to get that appreciation that actually this is important and to do something about it. And there's also that factor that rather than, if you're the CEO, rather than being concerned about will I be prosecuted, can I be prosecuted, and panicking when you get a notification of deficiencies, it's having that understanding of what your responsibilities are and exactly what it means if you've got a minor infringement or a major infringement. It's that accepting training from your fire safety practitioner within the business. I'd never use specialist, but basically receiving the training, getting understanding of what your roles and responsibilities are with regards to fire safety, making sure you're disseminating that down and getting the right people in place who, we're going to use this term a lot, which we've been using it for years now, competent. You've got the right people in place, they're competent, they've got the right training, knowledge, skills, experience, accreditation. And so that shows that it is important to the top people, and then those on the ground that are doing all the hard work can then gain that appreciation. Actually, this is important. They do know what they're talking about. Right, let's work together and deal with it, rather than a finger being pointed. Can I get prosecuted for this? Well, what does this mean? It does kind of reflect on the fact that, well, do you really understand and comprehend what this, the seriousness of this means?
Yeah.
And maybe then budgetary controls will be a bit more guided in where to spend money and sort of what to do to protect the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that what's interesting about, and Bernie's said, and I agree, that there's so many sort of echoes and comparisons between, fire safety and other aspects of health and safety. One thing where perhaps fire stands out to me anyway is that when something does go wrong, obviously it can go very, very badly and seriously wrong, and that can be, very costly, human costs, but also financial costs, etc., etc. So, whereas in health and safety, sometimes, it hasn't happened to us yet. It hasn't happened to anyone else, so it hasn't gotten to the front pages for anyone else. So therefore, it's kind of a bit easier to suppress. So, do you think, John, it's fair to say that there's a sort of an appreciation of the seriousness, but is there a little bit of maybe laxness around, well, we must be doing pretty good. It hasn't happened to us. We don't need to worry about it from that kind of senior level.
To some extent, and to sort of latch on to what you said, if there's a fire at a business, then people will visibly see it in the street. All the fire engines turn up, it makes the news, everyone's interested, and ultimately it's a visible thing. If someone comes to harm within a business for a fall or something, yes, it will be perhaps in the tabloids or it'll be printed somewhere, but it's not so visible from the outside. So there is a great deal of this brand protection. I need to protect the brand. The way I see my roles, I'm there to protect a brand for the company that I work for. But in the same instance, by doing so, I'm actually making the people safe. And health and safety is very much focused on, well, if it hasn't happened to us, what's the problem? I do feel people have more fear of fire safety at a senior level because of how public Grenfell was. Because again, you could see the fire; it was on all the news channels, so it is more visible. And then the backlash and all the things that come out afterwards. So I do feel perhaps seniorities within an organisation are more interested and want to do more about sort of preventing fires and making sure people are fire safe, because also there is that chance that the local fire service will come in and do an inspection and issue a notice that then goes to the top. Everyone panics. Whereas health and safety, you're probably less likely to get the HSE come in and do a visit, perhaps. It's less visible. And well, actually, we haven't had an accident so far, so we don't have an issue at the moment.
Pardon the quick interruption. We'll get you right back to the interview shortly. You're invited to join me at Risk Europe on the 12th and 13th of November at the Excel Centre in London. I'll be there doing live podcast interviews, hosting some seminars on stage, and talking to people on our stand. Your ticket is totally free, and there's a link in the notes where you can sign up and join us in November for this really exciting risk management related event. Here's the founder and event director, Nick James, with a few words on what you can expect. So what themes or challenges in risk management are going to be front and centre at this year's event?
Well, that's such an interesting question. And we're 6 weeks away. And in this fast-moving world, I do not know what's going to happen in those next 6 weeks. As to be able to say with authority, this will be front and center. But what I would say is governance risk compliance, GRC, is no longer just an operational function. It's a strategic imperative. And the professionals that work in this sector have to deal with accelerating uncertainty and change, interconnected risks, regulatory and compliance pressures, technology and digital transformation, climate risks, and the big one at the moment is geopolitical risks. And I'm sure that our friend in the White House is probably going to do something that everyone's going to be talking about in 6 weeks' time. So we're going to be covering everything to do with risk, governance and compliance at #Risk Europe.
So do join Nick and I on the 12th and 13th November at Risk Europe at the Excel Centre in London. You can find all the details on where to get your free ticket in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the interview. Yeah. Definitely, especially since the last few years where budgets for HSE have been decimated, it's fair to say. So I think, definitely less likely. So no, that's useful to know. So
I would say there, Christian, my apologies. Budgets I find for fire safety have actually gone up because people are actually, we need to make sure that we've got the right fire alarm system, the emergency lighting. You're more likely to get a visit from the fire service come in and say, right, you've got this deficiency, that deficiency. Your fire risk assessment, that's a legal requirement now. Doesn't matter how many employees you have to get a fire risk assessment. So ultimately that will flag issues. Whereas HSE, you do a risk assessment for a particular activity, but it's not the day-to-day running of the building per se. So sorry to jump in there, buddy.
No, absolutely. That's why we're here, right? To have a good chat. So in the world of health and safety, there's a lot of talk about sort of trying to move beyond compliance. Is that a theme within the fire safety world, Bernie, as well?
Definitely, and I think you've hit on one of my pet topics. Actually, Christian, is one of many, but there's two approaches. Compliance to me sort of means that you can tick something in a box and say it either meets or it doesn't, yes or no. Fire risk assessment is about someone applying knowledge and skills and looking and thinking, how realistic is this risk? How likely is this risk to come about? And actually applying that model of what's the risks, who's at risks, how likely, and therefore what do we need to do to mitigate? They're two separate and very different approaches in my view, and they do get conflated. So I would love us to move beyond compliance, and just because compliance to me indicates, well, as long as someone's got some knowledge of fire safety and produces a nice checklist, then we can just keep ticking yes, 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 no, 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 and we'll be fine. I believe it does all need to flow from having that ability to look at the risk, analyze it, and say, actually, you haven't got state of the art. For example, you haven't got state of the art fire alarm system or a state of the art fire suppression system, but you manage the building really, really well, and you manage the staff really well. And people do go around and they do look and they do say, oh, I've just seen that there's a fire extinguisher missing, there's an empty hook, or I've just noticed that there's a wedge holding a fire door open. I took it out, but this is where it was. And then that for me is far, it's gone beyond the compliance approach, and it's now saying, I've noted a problem, I've done something about it, I've reported it, and we need to just do a little bit of why was that? Why is that extinguisher missing? What happened to it? What issues is that flagged up? And it's that cause and effect, if you like, approach. So not just saying, oh, can someone go and replace the fire extinguisher? Why was it missing? And someone doing a little bit of a digging down into why is that door propped open and why is it always propped open? Because once you understand the cause, because sometimes, and I've done a couple of fire risk assessments where people have said, look, there's more damage being done to people where they're trying to pull trolleys of stuff through corridors and bash into fire doors. That's why they wedge them open. I said, well, you could put them on magnetic closers that operate with the fire alarm, couldn't you? So you could hold them open, but when the fire alarm sounds, they could shut. Oh, okay. So they've identified the problem, and that's great. They've just not taken it the next stage to say, what can we do about that? We're never going to stop people wedging these doors open because they're constantly using them and they, keep bashing into them and damaging them. So let's take a different approach. Let's take a different angle to it. And that for me is beyond compliance into what works here and what's safe in this building, and just being potentially a bit more creative to keep your people safe.
Is that John, where you would see the biggest downfall in fire risk assessments then, that people are sort of looking at them as tick box, just to build on what Bernie was saying?
It does depend on who is carrying out the fire risk assessment, and it does depend on who's receiving the fire risk assessment. Ultimately, what the responsible person should receive is something that doesn't just go by the guidance, sees each individual fire safety, life safety element as a separate entity and identify it as being not sufficient or sufficient. It's more gaining the broader picture and looking at the whole of the systems together and how they operate. Some fire risk assessors would go around just ticking the box, saying whether something is compliant or not, whereas there are a number of fire risk assessors that I work with. They would go beyond that. They would look at these systems, and you might have something that isn't quite as suitable as it should be, but with all the other systems in place, that mitigates the risk from that element. But then also it goes hand in hand with the person receiving it. If it's a 200-page document, the chances are they're just going to put it on a shelf, or they're just going to take the actions. What do I need to get this compliant? Because they don't have the time perhaps to focus on the nitty-gritty on all the elements together as a whole. So they may well simply sometimes just look at those actions. What is it that I need to do to get this compliant, in essence, to tick my box? So if the fire service came in, they would be happy, rather than perhaps getting an appreciation of how all these systems work together. And having worked with different companies, I did find that the companies were only interested sometimes in doing the bare minimum. The reason being is because if I spend X amount here, then I've got some more money left and I can do X amount over here. If I spend a lot here, I then can't do anything over there. Whereas I find with the updating of the guidance, so as before, you could have a single staircase and smoke, automatic opening vents and smoke ventilation. But what if the smoke ventilation failed? So many times I saw it where it'd been installed, might have been regularly checked, but wasn't actually tested to see if it could take away the smoke. Whereas nowadays you've got 2 staircases, you've got sprinklers within the flats. So ultimately, whereas in industry for years you've had these redundant backups, in fire safety it was very much reliant on one system, whereas now we're looking at, well, actually if that were to fail, it didn't work in the first place, we've got this as a backup and we've got this as a backup. So I do feel that the updated guidance is forcing a rise or a raising in what compliance actually means, rather than leaving it to the responsible person and the budget holder.
Can I add something to that, actually,
Yeah,
Christian?
please do,
You make some really good points here, John. And I think practical examples, if you like, of how to get ahead of the game. I often talk about ahead of the game. For me, compliance it's in your face. It's here now. You're not getting. I want to see resilient, fire safety resilient organisations that are looking ahead. And for me, the way you do that is almost exactly as John's just described it. You kind of need to do some war planning, tabletop exercises, call it what you like to say. Right, what are the major fire risks that could affect this building or our buildings? Now, that doesn't matter whether you're a property management company thinking about what happens if we had a fire, what would we do, what's likely to happen, what's not likely to, and actually game playing that through in a nice, easy environment to see where your areas of weakness are. Where are you vulnerable? Where are your residents vulnerable? And plug in those gaps. And that's more than just a fire risk assessment, which is a really important part of it. And I agree with John, the best fire risk assessors will do that. I try and collaborate. I want to collaborate with the building. I don't want to just walk around and give them so I always offer afterwards a session to say, right, let's go through it and make sure you've understood why I've written what I've written. It's a chance for them to challenge, but it's also a chance for me to explain the rationale. So important. But on the basis of that, do some tabletop exercising, do some training about what if this failed then? What if we rely so much on the automatic opening vents created this nice area where there's no smoke in the escape route. What if that fails? What would happen then? And having those what if moments and then seeing whether can we plug those gaps? What could we do? And that's now you've got not just a compliant organisation, you've got a resilient organisation, which can actually deal with issues, and you're not trying to make it up on the hoof on the day. Just a point I wanted to make in addition to John. Sorry.
Yeah, and great advice for anybody that's looking at health and safety as well, for sure. So definitely would echo that. Let's talk a little bit about the future and sort of emerging risks. So lithium-ion batteries is obviously one that's quite topical. Modern building materials, you mentioned Grenfell, very, very topical for the last few years. How are those things changing the fire safety landscape? Do you want to start on that, John?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those where obviously the press will latch on to something that will sell papers or something that will get people's attention. At the moment, my understanding is there aren't that many figures as to how many lithium-ion battery fires there have been, perhaps in the home and inside the home. We had the Luton Airport multi-storey car park fire. Everyone assumed initially, well, that's a lithium-ion battery. It was actually a diesel car. So there we go. Whether it's as bad as what people think and how it's reported, it wasn't that long ago. We had LPG and cars were being converted to LPG, and they were a major risk to firefighters because they used to go kaboom. And you have to try and work out, well, is this LPG? Isn't it LPG? But there wasn't the concern at the time. But because I think the press have latched onto this, obviously, yes, there is concerns. If you take the right precautions, to use the right chargers, charge it in the right environment, make sure your means of escape from your home is free. In the workplace, make sure you're managing the situation. Then it shouldn't be as much of a problem. There are lithium-ion battery extinguishers. There are lithium-ion battery fire blankets. The only issue is when it's off-gassing, you can cool it. You can stop that reaction when it reaches its critical temperature. Then you get thermal runaway. We never use the term fire in lithium-ion batteries. It's always thermal runaway. Once we get to that point, really, all you can do is protect the surrounding environment. But I don't think at this moment in time we still have this appreciation of what to do, how to deal with these sort of batteries. We have battery recycling boxes, but what if we get a lithium-ion battery? Oh, God, I don't know. Something we did at Imperial, we had buckets of sand that you could put it in, take it outside and just let it burn, let it sort of go through its sort of moody phase, moody stage. So, yeah, ultimately, I don't feel we're much further on with lithium-ion at the moment because there's still this uncertainty, but they're being used more and more and more.
Yeah.
With regards to sort of building materials, etc., I haven't necessarily seen a great deal of improvement. Nothing seems to have changed. We still use fireboard, firebat, the mastics, and the general material. And I don't know if anything does need to change. It's more the test condition has to be appropriate for the environment in which something's going to be used. If it isn't, then it's not appropriate for being used in that fashion.
Makes sense, yeah. Anything to add there, Bernie?
A couple of things. I think with lithium ion, I sort of agree and a bit of perhaps a disagree with John, and I don't mean that in the nicest way. I think it depends on what sort of lithium ion battery you're talking about. In electric vehicles, obviously there's a much bigger risk, much more power generated. And you've got to be a little bit careful of those. The big risks for me are not the smaller batteries that are in our phones, in our computer, laptops. They're actually the things like in electric bicycles, scooters, mobility. So the smaller vehicle, personal sort of use for scooters, bikes, etc., where they're being modified.
Yeah.
So there's a risk there, and there's a lot of advice. For the people watching this podcast, I would say go and check London Fire Brigade's charge safe advice for lithium batteries for those smaller types, because they do talk about things like don't leave things charging overnight, don't leave them in the escape route, don't mess about with your original. You keep the original charger and the original battery. Don't go and buy cheap replacements, or try and soup up your bike or your scooter to go faster, because you're probably going to defeat the battery management system, such as it may be, and then you're more liable to have a fire. Yeah. With the electric vehicles, I actually think they're safer probably than the internal combustion engine type. I still think there are far more fires, even pro rata, with conventionally fueled vehicles than there are with electric vehicles. And again, there are things you can do around making sure the chargers are the right type, etc., making sure that someone inspects and they're not damaged and your car's not got damage to the battery in any way. There's ways you can at least try and prevent. Yeah. So lithium, I do agree with John, but I think there's a lot of information out there. We're still learning more, and we learn more almost by the month, but there's a lot of information out there for people to go and have a look at to keep themselves safe. Yeah. I think with sustainability, again, agree with John 100%. There's not been a huge changes. Where I am seeing things is there's a lot more caution around building control with timber frame construction. Very, very sustainable. And actually, timber frame buildings, provided the right protection is put around that frame, they're perfectly safe. Where they're more vulnerable is during the construction phase.
Mm-hmm.
So you must put mitigation in place during that construction phase, because that's when the building is most. And certainly London, we went through a bit of a spate of some really awful. There was one in Hendon near the police training college, massive timber frame building, and had a fire during the construction phase and lost the whole building. So that's when they're really vulnerable, and you've got to be careful. But I do think as new ways of construction come on the market, what worries me a little bit, Christian, for the future is we're going to need to have some innovative solutions to innovative ways of building.
Yeah.
And the way things are currently, everyone looks at current standards, quite rightly, I understand that, but we somehow need to get standards to catch up with. Innovation and standards need to go hand in hand somehow. Because there are some brilliant solutions out there that people won't accept or recommend because there's not a standard that covers them. And I think somehow we need to give people a reassurance around those. And I'm not saying everything. You don't just say because it's innovative, it's great and it works.
No, of course, yeah.
But somehow innovation and testing innovation to make sure it works needs to keep up with the news, where we're going with sustainable building, if that's going to be a big thing. I think it is.
Yeah.
I don't want one to stifle the other. I don't want the lack of a standard to stifle innovative, which can keep people safe. And that's just a little bit of a worry there.
Yeah. No, that makes good sense. It's similar, analogous to AI, isn't it? How the whole AI thing is developing. The laws and the rules and regulations, we've got to keep pace, otherwise we risk being overwhelmed by what might be happening in that space.
It's completely right, Christian. Completely right.
Yeah. Last question then, guys, and then we'll draw this to a close. Don't know who wants to go first on this one, but just one message you want every sort of safety professional watching or listening to this to take back to their workplace. What would that one key message be?
Go on, I'll have a go to start with this, because
go on then.
It's Bonfire Night when this goes out, and you're going to see some wonderful displays. I hope very, very safe. And if you're not sure, there's plenty of advice on how to have a safe on the website, but I'm sure everyone's going to celebrate safely. But let's commit to a different type of spark. So instead of the sparklers let's have the spark of leadership, of curiosity about safety, of curiosity about keeping people safe, whether that's fire safety in particular, but a curiosity around continuous improvement. And let's have a curiosity around building a safe and resilient workplace, home, whatever that may be. So I'm trying to link the two together here, and I think let's have a spark of leadership around building safe and resilient workplaces, buildings, and where people can keep safe wherever they are, work, play, rest, wherever.
I think we can all buy into that one.
I think he's trying to trademark a name there, but
it's good. I like it.
We'll see it on t-shirts on everywhere too. For me, only joking, Bernie. For me, it would be, if you work on your safety culture within the environment, your workspace, even at home, then that you would see fantastic results. It's all about making sure people have that knowledge, that training, and have it in their mind, fire safety. Like Bernie said earlier, walking through, don't just walk past that open door or that extinguisher that's had the ring pull taken out, or if there's an emergency light that doesn't work. Have that culture where you are actively looking for these things. People are actively interested. People have that knowledge on the importance of a fire door and keeping that door shut rather than wedging it open, etc. And that will make, as a fire safety practitioner, that will make your life so much easier. and also it will make the environment in which people work and operate, and also at home, so much safer. Personally, that's what I see.
Can I just remind
Fantastic.
people on the back of what John's just said? Can I just remind people as well? Very few businesses that experience a fire actually manage to keep going afterwards. There's there's a significant percentage that will experience a fire and don't recover, and that business goes bust. So it's not just about the here and now and the immediate, it's about the longevity and the resilience of your business. So if you're doing things right and everyone is working together to have a safe, good business or property, the likelihood is you're going to keep going. But if you ignore this, you do run the risk of having something that will put you out of business at some point. So please don't.
Just like health and safety, you don't have to have a fire for the fire service to come in and prosecute you. Ultimately, if they deem that you're not operating safely and that something could happen, then ultimately you can still be prosecuted. That's the key thing as well.
Good stuff. Good word of warning. Well, thank you so much, chaps. I learned a lot there. Lots and lots to chew on and think about. And a really vital topic that, as we said, if it goes wrong, it can be really catastrophic. So definitely one for us to all focus on and have that spark, as you said, Bernie. So appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Christian. Good to see you again, John. Take care, guys. All the best. Bye-bye now.
See ya.
Good stuff. There we go. Well, thank you to Bernie for taking part in that, and thanks, John, for your part in that as well. Any reflections on that chat? Now you've had a chance to hear it back.
My ADHD does kick in, and I move around a great deal. But no, there were lots of key messages there, and there's, I've sort of seen some of the questions related to that. But yeah, I think linking things to the home and the business, I think is a key aspect, because maybe people receive the message better if they consider, actually, how do I do it at home? Why don't I do that at work? But yeah, no, it's a good subject matter discussed.
Yeah, thanks. So dive into a couple of questions then from the audience. So Will asked, what are the top 3 things that a business should be doing regarding fire safety? So some practical things to go away and do.
So I was thinking about this. I would suggest considering maybe a strategic and maybe an operational level. So strategic, you would definitely consider the safety culture from the top down, so senior management taking it seriously, putting it on their agenda during their board meetings, etc. That then sends the message down that people are taking it seriously. Business continuity, Bernie did touch on it within the conversation. So making sure that you consider sort of the what if factors, maybe tabletop exercise. What if this happened? What would be the impact on the business? How would we remain resilient? Something that we used to do at Imperial. In the fire service even, we didn't necessarily be able to practice a plane crash, so we'd have to do a tabletop exercise with certain key members of the community around you. And then ultimately, a fire strategy is very important, but more often than not, our business will have a fire risk assessment. So you've got all these things in place. You get a fire risk assessment done and get someone else's perspective to make sure that what you do have in place is effective, is compliant, and is relevant. Those are the 3 key things that I would suggest introducing.
Good stuff. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, John. And another question from Nicholas was, with the highlighted issues with e-bikes and e-scooter charging in high-rise buildings from the London Fire Service, where do you think this should go? Should these vehicles be banned from being indoors?
So it's very important to remember an e-bike is legal to ride an e-bike on the road. a unicycle and an unlicensed scooter is actually against the law. It's against the Road Traffic Act to use these on the road. Obviously, you're not meant to use them on the path unless it's a licensed scooter. People shouldn't have them and shouldn't be using them full stop. But maybe that's not being policed effectively. A big thing that I did start finding when I was a fire safety inspecting officer within sheltered accommodation was the increase in number of mobility scooters. So then the site, the unit used to have to try and build or find somewhere for these mobility scooters to go because people were charging them in their residences or in the corridor. So perhaps there needs to be a consideration going forward when constructing apartment blocks, etc. They'll possibly have an area for normal push bikes. Maybe there needs to be that consideration going forward for if people are going to have these things, such as e-bikes, where can we safely allow people to store them and charge them at the same time? A ban, I don't know. We're not necessarily not there yet. A police state and going into people's homes to see if they're charging this, that, and the other. I don't think we're quite there yet. However, we can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening. We have to consider these things. And of course, a building is built for that purpose in time. And I always found at Imperial, for example, whenever a building was built a couple of years later, that space was then not suitable because things would expand, different experiments would go on. So we need to maybe consider when designing and constructing buildings, maybe we need to consider these sort of factors.
Yeah, no, definitely some good advice there. Last question then, John, from me is, could you share any valuable, useful resources that people might find beneficial? And I'd include in that a little bit about the IOSH fire community, which you're the chair of. Tell us a bit about that and how people can get involved in that as well.
Okay, well, there's a vast amount of information available online. The local fire and rescue services on their websites. I'm very familiar with Bedfordshire's, obviously, being an ex-employee. They have lots and lots of different information. The National Fire Chiefs Council, they have lots of pieces of information and documentation. The government websites, they provide, if you just do a Google search and look on the right websites, so the government websites, they have lots of information on different roles, responsibilities, the different regulations, the laws, etc., etc. And obviously being a member of a third party accredited professional body, shall we say. So I am a member of the Institute of Fire Safety Managers, but also, as you said, I'm the chair of the Fire Risk Management Community for IOSH. Ultimately, anyone can become a member at a certain level. If you want to progress through the levels, then obviously you have to have certain experience, qualifications, etc. Any member of IOSH can apply to be a member of the committee for the fire risk management community, or for any of the communities that IOSH have. And even now they've gone to communities. We've changed the focus where anyone can apply to be the chair. Any member of IOSH can apply to be the chair of one of these communities without having actually sat on the committee. But LinkedIn, so if you were, for example, might obviously jump on Christian's LinkedIn, perhaps my LinkedIn, I haven't been on for a little while, but IOSH Fire Risk Management Group LinkedIn does offer quite a great deal of guidance and advice. There's obviously some that just don't offer any advice, they just blooming repost things. But yeah, there is so much information out there, and I do find that with my post, it got quite a few views because perhaps people weren't sure of where to look or what they were looking for. So, if you've got anyone in the profession, always shout out. It's definitely a learning environment. Health and safety and fire safety is a learning environment where we learn from each other's experiences.
Spot on, yeah, spot on. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, John. Thanks as well to Bernie, who obviously can't be here today, but contributed a lot to the discussion. And I hope everybody has a fun, enjoyable, and most importantly, safe bonfire night. Enjoy your sparklers, but wear your gloves. Keep your distance from your fireworks and do all of that good stuff. And have an enjoyable bonfire night. All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next Safety Roundtable. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.